Grant us your blessing, Lord, as we open your word. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Does it sound good? Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to continue our consideration of fractals.
This head is cut off.
Yeah, yeah, it's cool. That's all it. Okay. We'll continue our consideration of fractals. What did we leave off yesterday considering? All right, so we're just laying out some concepts about how fractals work. The idea that we lay out a model, study that model, lay out all its specifications, all its specifics, and that model we use as a template to develop a line. And when we look for the line, that is the when we look at the line that we develop from the model, right, in terms of application, we made the point that we're looking initially for a macro line, right, big picture or a line of progression. So we use the parable of the 10 virgins as an illustration, and we saw that there's an application of the line that takes you all the way from Millerite history through to our time now, which you call the line of the history of Adventism, right? And within that application, we can see two fractals, that of Millerite history and that of art history, the line of 144,000. Right. And the importance of being able to do that, beginning with a macro line. Why is it important to begin to take this step of laying out a macro line? What did we say?
To see a complete picture.
To see a complete picture. There was something else that we said.
Because we have a template.
We have a template. Another, yes? Template?
Yeah, to derive, to make sure that we have the right event in our application.
Yes, we have a witness. Right? So before we'd go from the model straight to the Millerite line, but we've developed this macro level line, which takes you, which covers the span of Adventist history, right? And the benefit of having that is it gives another witness. You can have greater confidence in the conclusions that you're deriving from the Millerite line. Right? So it's important to be able to do that we train ourselves in doing that and avoid the mistake of doing what is it that we've been doing?
Running to the application first.
Running to the application or running to our line, our fractal, the line of the priest. So that's important. What else did we put on the record yesterday? We discussed this idea that the waymarks in the fractal, while they look like the waymarks in the macro line, they're still different waymarks. And we just use this model of, 1A, 2A, 3A, 1A, 1B, 2B, 3B, and 1C, 2C, 3C, to illustrate this point. Right? We saw that here, right? Although close of probation parallels 2019, typifies 2019. If you looked at this line as a line of progression and you continue it on past the history of the priest, you would eventually reach this waymark that we called 4A here, the close of probation. Right? So there's still, in a line of progression, there's still two different waymarks. In a line of progression, there's still two different waymarks. But in a fractal, which is repeat and enlarge, they parallel one another, right? And we said we would look at that a little more. What does it mean that, what else did we say to that? We said, so 2019 is not the close of probation, but it looks like the close of probation. There are characteristics that we see at the close of probation, which carry over here, right? And we had some discussion about that with this waymark of the second coming, because I think it's easiest to see with that waymark. That the second coming, if you go to great controversy, where the second coming is discussed as a waymark, it describes various developments which symbolically represent things that we're going to see at Daniel. The glorification and ascension of the saints before the heathen, right? So in 2021, that development is a symbolic representation of a glorification and ascension of God's people in 2021. And what have we understood that looks like? It means essentially what we're coming out of hiding, right? We are now coming out to be open to do the work of publicly proclaiming this message that we've been in hiding, preparing to proclaim all this time, right? So we have that glorification at the second coming, paralleling, symbolically representing developments that take place in 2021. It's not Christ literally coming the second time. So that's how these waymarks parallel one another. There's some similarities, but they're not the same waymark. Because again, with the second coming, if you look at this as a line of progression, you would eventually reach the waymark of the second coming as its own waymark down the road. Yes? Yes, Mr. Lee? Yes? No? Did I catch you again? You weren't listening. Okay. So I think that's about as far as we got. And I think I don't remember if we asked or answered the question. How does 2019 look like Daniel 12:1? How does 2019 look like the close of probation?
Separation.
Right. So where do you begin? What's your starting point?
What do you mean what's the starting point?
In order to begin to develop that understanding, where do you start?
Oh, you're talking about 2019?
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
How does 2019? How does the close of probation? How does 2019 look like the close of probation?
Oh, I was thinking something else.
But still, how would you establish that? What steps would you take in order to develop?
I mean, I don't know if we can look at what happened in October of 1844, because
Why are you going there? It's not anything we're looking at here.
yeah, that's what I mean. It's a characteristic.
Yes,
So
but
I don't know.
no, you do know. You do know because we've been discussing it this whole time. Where do you begin?
In Daniel 12.
In Daniel 12, okay. You look at Daniel 12, Michael stands up, end of intercession. Where would you get more information on that? You do know. Where'd you get more information on that? Because Daniel 12:1 is not the only place that talks about Daniel 12:1.
Well, in great controversy.
Exactly, right? So you then go also to the spirit prophecy, which talks about this, about what takes place here, right? So this line, particularly these waymarks, are laid out in grade controversy. So you go to grade controversy, where it's talking about the close of probation, and see what is described there, right? And then you would, after looking at that understanding, then you'd look to draw parallels. What you see taking place there is a symbolic representation of what takes place here. So what does she talk about at the close of probation? When she talks about the close of probation, Daniel 12:1, Michael standing up, what are the scenes? We've all read it. What are the scenes that she describes? You have the plagues, okay. The plagues begin to fall. What else do you see?
I think the close of probation is when he comes out as a thief in the night.
Is that,
Are you talking about the events come after the crucifixion?
I guess just the events in connection with that waymark. When she talks about Daniel 12:1,
Like Jacob's trouble.
Jacob's time of trouble,
The decree?
death decree.
Time. Later on, formalization.
Okay, but that's,
It's
okay. What happens with God's people and the world? What are the dynamics of the relationship between God's people and the world?
Separated.
The world is uniting.
Well,
The righteous being righteous, the wicked being wicked.
right, there's that separation, right? And there's a death decree, the wicked are fighting the righteous. And there's that separation of the two classes, right? So anything on,
So when we're looking at 2019, shouldn't we see some sort of a decree? But like yesterday, we were having a conversation that there's different levels. So that would be us versus Future for America.
yeah, so what do we see, right? Because this is a fractal, it's not the close of probation waymark where there's an actual death decree. The events in 2019 look similar to what we see here. So as we lay out, what do we see? What does the red controversy describes? It describes, maybe let's even list them.
Good idea.
At the COP waymark. What did we say?
Decree.
This is death decree. What else?
Jacob's time of trouble.
Jacob's time of trouble. What else?
There's the wrath of God. That's in the great controversy.
Oh, okay, that's the beginning of the plagues.
Mhm.
Like essentially God's people are sealed even though they don't know it, but there's
Okay, so there's a sealing. And there's that sort of separation of two classes, right? Are there more things you want to put down?
Oh, you're gonna put shutdown. It is finished. No, because something's finished there clearly in the view of probation.
Okay.
He that's right stays right. I mean, I don't know how to apply it.
Shut the door. Anything else?
I'm not too sure. I have to read the chapter.
Right. So, I mean, from our reading, we can all agree to these that we've laid out, right?
Yeah.
So let's ask ourselves, what in 2019 parallels look similar to what we see here?
The separation for sure.
Right, two classes, separation, and we see the separation between who?
Us and FFA.
The movement versus FFA.
And so now FFA is saying there was a shut door.
But I don't think these lines are contingent upon what those in error are saying.
Good.
Right. So we have two classes, and in the model, it's presenting the two classes are the 144,000 and the world. And what is the death decree? What parallels the death decree in this conflict?
Persecution.
Exactly. You know, the death decree here, it's persecution, right? We don't see any decree in 2019 because FFAs were not even dealing with the state yet. This is all internal to the movement, right?
But it would be, wouldn't it be a decree from them possibly? Or like saying that we're out, or you know what I mean?
That's the only way you could look at it, right? But the fundamental point is persecution.
I think it's death, isn't it? So, and that death, when you kill someone's reputation, so that's what they're doing, it's character assassination and slander, which is completely destroying any credibility of the messenger, destroying the messenger.
What about finances? Can't buy, sell,
Destruction of the messenger.
Yeah,
like they cut off our finances, so.
Well, that's true.
that's definitely a good one.
Yeah, finances.
It's not physically killing someone, but you destroy them, you destroy their name, right? Which it can be as effective
Absolutely.
as
If not more so.
yeah, in terms of silencing someone, putting them away, right?
Because when we think about the external, it's spheres of influence.
Mhm.
And if you destroy someone's influence, you destroy any effect that they could have in helping someone because they don't have any trust in you.
What else?
Like she said, financial.
Now, financial, okay, destroying their ability to work. Does the financial count?
I guess stopping buying and selling it's
I mean, as far as on our original list, that actually happens, right?
Which original is?
no buying and selling.
On the
No buying
left.
selling.
Yeah, but wouldn't that no buying and selling be after the Sunday law during the long cry period?
That's already all happened.
Right,
Okay.
because it's not in a close of probation, so
But it happened before, that's the
Yes.
point.
it happened before, but this is not specifically
This
in a
is
time of
specifically
close of
to-
probation.
This way.
I'd like
No
to
buy,
do-
no sell is here.
I'd like
Yeah.
to do the 2014 one also after this.
Sure. Sure, that's fine. What else do you see?
Are we going to make application of plagues?
The plagues.
Are we doing that with the virus and the locusts? There seemed to be some controversy on forums about that. There's a literal application to say these locusts are a real plague.
Well, yeah, and
the coronavirus is a real plague.
But
yeah,
aren't the plagues real? Because I remember in Alberta last year, Tess was presenting that when we look at the 7, she was presenting a line of progression for the 7 last plagues, basically showing that the things that are going to be the 7 last plagues, not dispensation. They're not mystical things that are going to emerge, in this time period. They're already here. And she, for example, she takes, vaccines and measles and people, and does a line of progression with that, saying, these diseases that are already here, that are resurging, or the conditions are being created for them to resurge. Those are the things that are going to be our plagues, They're things that are already here. So
we're not saying, so when it says the plagues, what the plagues, blood, the water turning to blood, for instance, we're saying that's not literally going to happen like it did in Egypt.
no, it's
But
not.
we're going to make an application of it on another level. It's some disaster that happens, but we don't know.
Hypothetically, just say, like, it's not literally going to turn red with blood, right? It's gonna, like an oil spill that makes all the water undrinkable. A massive oil spill, the likes of which we've never had before. That's just a hypothetical. We're saying that, you know, it's not literally blood and, you know, and so on.
So say like the first one, which seems pretty literal disease to us, like they felt a noise of a grievous sore upon the men. Are we going to apply one of these plagues to coronavirus, or are we just saying this is general at this point? I don't know how to.
Well, I guess the thing is, when Tess was addressing it, she's addressing this time period. You know,
So we're in a time now anyway.
Yeah,
We're kind of-
and she was connecting it like with measles, for example. You know, a boil upon people's flesh and so on. If my memory serves me correct. But in our time period, I mean, no one is doing this. No one is. It's something that has come up in discussion as to, we know that we're in the time period when we should see the 7 last plagues. And people are seeing that there's been this unusual prevalence of disasters that have been taking place around the world. And they're wondering if there's a connection. I'm saying we all know that's a discussion taking place. We haven't formalized anything, but I think it's a line of thought worth investigating, right?
I remember at one point in time, it was also mentioned that after the close of probation, those things that are mentioned in the scriptures and things, that we're to take them literally, not spiritually. So are we saying that now we're still going to continue to take a look at them in a spiritual aspect after the close of probation?
I guess my question would be, what was the basis of that deduction that after the close of probation we move back to literal?
Where did you get that from? Spirit Prophecy quote?
Well, I mean, when we're reading this, reading things, blood turning to water.
Yeah, and Adventists will take that literal, but
Right.
yeah. But I guess the question we need to ask is, what's the basis of that? Why are we then switching?
Well, one of the thoughts that, things that I'm thinking back again to is that of Miller's rules. If we are able to take them literally or to take them as they are without causing any injury, then we're to accept it as such. So is there something there that we see that we can't take them as a literal status?
Well, blood turning to water, water turning to blood's pretty weird.
And every living soul died in the sea. That seems quite extreme.
I don't know, it's interesting because that's not how we look at Revelation 8.
Because Miller's rules do say that, when it's breaking the laws of nature,
Right.
it's symbolic. So the 7 last plagues appear to be a candidate for symbolic interpretation because, water turning to blood, that's out of the order of nature,
It's kind of weird because the boils and the locusts, or no, there's no
But then,
locusts in the 7, but
If we take a look at that in the time of Egypt, that too was out of order of nature as far as that was concerned. It's not like a natural thing that all of a sudden, the things turn into blood.
Those were miracles, though, I thought.
The difference between Exodus is that Exodus is being recorded not as a prophetic sort of symbolic presentation, but as just literal history of what happened, right, in the past. Was it the explicitly prophetic presentations? I think we're required to look at them symbolically, and that's nothing. Prophecy is always symbolic.
And perhaps the principle of when we look at Egypt, I think they worshipped these things, didn't they? So this is all, if you look at the principle behind it, he's actually attacking what they're worshipping. He's saying, you can't trust in these things because they're not trustworthy. I need to trust my servants instead. So there's going to be something about how they worship and what they worship, which is similar to fire down from heaven. We know the beast is going to call fire down, the image of the beast will call fire down from heaven. I don't think anyone would argue that was literal in our history. They might start saying they're going to do some sacrifice on, I've heard that before, on a mountain and fire will come down like we did in Elijah's time. But we know with our methodology of parable teaching, these are symbols, these are not literal. So they have a dispensational application, which if we're seeing, I think there's two things. One is the methodology of parables. The other thing is as we're looking back at these fractals now, we're seeing how it looked on our line, like 2014, we're looking back at it as a Sunday law and saying, what did that look like in our time? And now we're going to use that as a type of what it's going to look like in the future. So now if we do the same with the plagues, we're going to use parables and we're going to use the line when it actually is happening right now. So for instance, Tess is making application of this flu to the Spanish flu. So, and I think that's legitimate. So we see on the line, it's in the right place on the First World War, that this Spanish flu. So maybe now we can start using that and looking back at these histories and seeing what's the next thing to come up based on that. And now we're going to take that and say, how's that applies to the plagues in the future? Because now we're seeing it's a plague on the line from the past. So it's a disease, it's a real disease of pandemic. Maybe this is the first plague. Maybe this is what the first plague looked like for us. And then we've got to make some connections. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? So we're looking back and to make an application in the future as well. So I'm sure we're going to get some more information that's going to give us ability to predict what it looks like.
So there was a good point here, you know, that maybe some of these plagues from Egypt, it all had a dealing with a false religion. So then when we're taking a look at the future plagues, do they also have to have a correspondence to that of religion or false religion?
Conspiracy theories.
That's first thing.
Well, I mean, that's a thought. I've not investigated it. Because yes, definitely there's a parallel between the plagues of Egypt and the 7 last plagues. Ellen White makes that connection, which then opens the door. It gives license to then paralleling. It gives license to not only look at Revelation, the plagues in Revelation is describing what's going to happen. It gives license to look at what happened in Exodus as well, right? As in some way also typifying what's going to take place in our time. And that point is taken. I mean, that the things that fell upon Egypt were upon their idols, right? So that parallel, maybe although not directly expressed in Revelation, in Revelation, can be brought into our understanding of how we understand the 7 last plagues at the end of the world are going to look like.
And it links into our message that this was exposing to the Egyptians the fallacy of trusting in these things, that their worship is not sustainable, that it's not trustworthy, it doesn't have power to save. So it's an exposing of their misplaced trust, which is what we're doing. We're unmasking the sins of Babylon. People think, what? These people of Babylon? We thought they were God's church. On that similar level, perhaps. It's connected.
So this, I mean, I do have a little bit of trouble in that, especially when it comes, like, say, for example, the 7th plague there, which is the great earthquake. And then and when I read the Great Controversy, you know, it talks about this here great earthquake, that it actually is there because of the voice of God. You know, so how do you distinguish it then?
The thing is that we don't know what the 7 last plagues look like. Right? We really don't. I believe it's not something that's been open to us to understand, you know, to their fullest extent at this time. We're not in the dispensation, I think, where those things are, not that I think, I know we're not in the dispensation where those things are opened up in their fullest sense. Because when you look at the 7 last plagues, you know, there's a tendency to underread them as literal. I say they're symbolic. When you look at Rome, the woes that fell upon Rome, there's a parallel between the woes on Rome and the 7 last plagues. That the woes on Rome fell upon the land, the sea, the springs of fresh waters, and the air, I think it was, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have, you know, all those judgments, and when you look at the plagues at the end of the world, they're smiting the same things, right? The land, the sea, the springs of fresh waters, and the air, right? But when we look at Rome, it's all in terms of the the trumpets and the woes, all of that is symbolic, right? The first 4 trumpets, it's symbolic. It's not literally upon, it's land, sea, and springs of waters, right? So if you draw that parallel, because there's a clear parallel between the forces used to bring down the Western division of the Roman Empire and the 7 last plagues that we see, the parallels are there, but with Romans, it's all symbolic, it's, nothing fell upon the fresh waters, right? It's representing Attila and where he was coming from, right? So how do we then understand the 7 last plagues at the end? My answer is I don't know, right? And I don't know if we can know to the fullest extent.
What about that, some of the events that we are going through are a shadow or a little type of what's coming?
Yes, they are.
So which means that if they are, what we live in today will be repeated, during that period of time. Whether it's
Mhm.
So when you say you don't know, or we don't know, I think it's because it's not been formalized,
Yes.
that we can see them.
Yeah.
Because we can trace them, we can see, for example, with the virus, what it brings to the economy,
Mhm.
And to the shutdown, and we can follow that circle, that link,
Mhm.
And Sister Tess said the first case came after our Shakur in November.
Yes.
Yeah. So to me, it's becoming more compelling to draw the developments that have taken place really since our Shakur, all these crises that have opened up, with the 7 last plagues. It's no coincidence, particularly when you consider also Jacob's time of trouble. It's clear that this is what is happening in the movement, right? From my perspective, it's very evident to see. So you have Jacob's time of trouble, and it's in this time that the plagues are falling, and we have these calamities. I guess what I'm saying is to draw that tight correlation that the coronavirus parallels this plague, and the locusts in Africa parallel this plague, and the
Fires in Australia, she said.
the fires in Australia parallel this plague. I'm saying we can't do that, or we don't have enough information to do that. But if we're going to look at it in the most general sense of calamities falling upon the world, marked calamities falling upon the world in the time of Jacob's trouble, I think we see that, saying it in the most general sense. But I can't go any more tighter than that in terms of, unless someone has thought about that.
Well, Australia, when she mentioned that, the ash got swept away by the rain that came after, and then all the rivers are destroyed now. So that's interesting, because you said there's like an oil spill, right? And like that happened in Australia. And she says it'll never be the same again.
Yeah, I think definitely it's compelling to me, right? That thought that what we're seeing are our fractal sort of fulfillment of what will be the 7 last plagues. And that is tightened by the idea that we're in Jacob's time of trouble, and we see that, right, within the movement right now. So I'm not threatened by that concept. I'm not threatened by that idea. So, right, we're laying out the parallels. Jacob's time of trouble. What's happening here?
Wrestling.
The saints are wrestling.
Mental wrestling.
Yeah, mental wrestling.
With disease, sickness, maybe.
Is this what we've seen? Yeah. You know, and says, you know, there's a prevalence. Some people are struggling with depression. Some people are even struggling with suicide. So people going through real mental battles of anguish over, I call it crisis of faith. You know, a great reckoning with God and their lives and their circumstances, right? And the things that they're going through, you know. And the way it is universal that almost everywhere you go, like the places I've been, everyone's going through the same. Not everybody, but many people are going through that experience at the same time. You know, I could speak more about that, but that's definitely taking place. So the plagues, for now, we'll just put these varied crises.
What did you call it before? Unmarked calamities?
Marked calamities, not usual things, you know, like when I say marked, the word marked, it's something peculiar, something noteworthy. And the sealing, what does that represent?
Settling into the truth, both intellectually and spiritually.
Yes. The sealing is a settling into the truth.
Unifying,
Beg your pardon?
or unifying as well.
Unifying, yes.
Yeah, because we're seeing things on the same line.
I think what we see with Jacob though is this doubt as to whether he's in a safe condition or not.
Mhm.
And I think that's connected to the mental wrestling.
Yeah, that's the time of trouble aspect.
Yeah. That he's wrestling with the angel.
He's doubting his own warmth. He's doubting, you know. But at the same time, you know, at the same time, although they're going through that trial, the trial of their faith, they're wrestling with that doubt. They are settled into the truth. For that time, they are settled into that truth. But they don't feel like it. So in this time period, there's a truth that has been opened up, right? The truth opened up. If we look at it from the perspective of a dispensation, the truth opened up Sunday Lord to the close of probation. Right? They're settled in the sealing truth. They're settled in the sealing truth. And they can't be moved on it when the close of probation comes, even though they're led through this trial. So the parallel I'm drawing is 2014 to 2019, truths have been opened up. And there's an experience that these people go through where they're becoming settled into this truth. It's amidst conflict. It's amidst conflict with the enemies of the truth, right? It's amidst the internal wrestling that they're going through, right? But they're settling into that truth at the same time. There are all these things happening at the same time. That's how I see it. That's how I see it. I'd say not only because, like from my perspective, I can say I've experienced that. You know, there are lots of things going on. I may be having my own Jacob's time of trouble. There's this fight going on with the enemies of the truth. But with these truths opened up in this dispensation, the more you look at it, you know, the more grounded, you know, and other people are going through that same experience, right? The opening up of the midnight cry and the principles that is bringing forth. The more you look at them, the more you unpack them, the more you understand the methodology, you're becoming more and more settled, right? Such that you won't be moved by, you won't be moved by, you know, lines of argument as to the truthfulness of these concepts.
Is part of it that we don't have all the information, or can we not say that? I'm not sure with Jacob whether he had all the information, but what I see there is that he doesn't recognize this is God.
Mhm.
Because he's wrestling with this person as an enemy. And so he doesn't really know who God is, and he's fearful for his life. He thinks he's under a death threat. But he really doesn't recognize Jesus until he gets struck in the thigh and he gets agony. And then he realizes supernaturally, oh, this is God, I'm not letting go till you bless me now.
Mhm.
And I think part of our struggle is this of God or not? Is this God, this word, these lines, this truth? When we get all these attacks from the enemy that it's error, that we can't prove everything, that we don't know everything, I don't know if all that's connected. Because Jacob doesn't know what he's going to do. It's that doubt of how he's going to respond to him. Is he going to kill him? So he's got fear for his literal life. And I think we've got fear for our spiritual life.
Mhm.
On that level. That we don't have all the answers, and perhaps we can't defend the truth like we'd like to. And that's part of the wrestling.
I mean, I guess that's someone's wrestling where, you know, there's some people who it's not so much the issue of not having answers. It's, you know, like I know someone who's in a mental health hospital right now, someone in this movement, you know, because they've sunk into such a deep depression, you know, just essentially being tortured by these feelings of just not being worthy, you know, and that the mistakes that they've made in their spiritual walk and in their lives up to this point, you know, just feeling so bad about them and feeling that, you know, there's just no redemption from them.
Which is Jacob.
Yeah, that's Jacob,
Yeah.
right? So you get things like that. Parminda makes application of Jacob's time of trouble to, in this dispensation, the truth opened up was the principle of equality. The principles opened up under the midnight cry. And now we come here and there is a wrestling, right? You were speaking in Uganda at the time. There's a real wrestling taking place regarding the internalization and implementation of this principle, of, you know, these principles, equality, you know. So I think there's that line of thought as well.
See the mistakes we made on that quality. Yeah.
Then what is the shut door? Because we know it's not an end of intercession, because when Michael stands up, that's the only place where that happens. We don't have Michael standing up again and again and again, right? There's only one place where he stands up. So when we look at what it means that he stands up, right? What do we see here that looks like that? What do we see in 2019 that looks like Michael standing up?
To me, the shut door is, I told you, it's accepting or rejecting, you know, the test. And so if you reject, you shut your own door. It's not Christ standing up. It's you who decide on your own to reject the light. So,
Yeah, I'll say the same thing, maybe phrase it differently, that what happens at the shut door? People make decisions about, the people are settled into the decisions that they've made.
So right, we see a clear separation of two classes then.
Yeah, at the shut door, there's a clear separation of two classes. Okay.
Could a person, and I'm just maybe phrasing this in my own way here, could a person then say it is just like in 1844 where you see the rising up of God's people and going from the holy place into the most holy, even though that you don't see a holy place or most holy physically, but in faith that there is a rising up of these disciples and following him.
I guess, well, if you're drawing from the line of the Millerites, that 2019 would be October 22nd, and second coming 1863. Okay. So yeah, you could draw that parallel if we're going to look at that line. You know, what took place then?
I think when we line up the cross with, White lines up the cross with October 1844, and she says that both have a disappointment, but she talks about both classes going into darkness. People went into total darkness or perfect darkness. I think she uses those different phrases for two histories, but it's that idea that some people have permanently rejected the truth. I guess is what Sister Jen is saying, but it looks like they've gone into darkness, so they're in direct opposition to those who are still standing on the light in that sense.
I'll put going into darkness, because someone goes into darkness. Does that mean the intercession has ended? Does that mean God has ended the intercession?
No.
No.
Right? You know, you can put yourself in a position that you can put yourself in where God can't reach your mind. You've put yourself in that position. It does not mean He has ended your intercession, right? It's like that passage where it talks about those who rejected the first angel so darkened their minds that they rejected the second, and they could see no light in the third. Although intercession had not ended, they put themselves in such darkness that the light couldn't reach them, right? So there's a going into darkness, and I want to distinguish that from the end of intercession. Right. So in all these things, we see how the close of probation, we see things in 2019 that look like the close of probation, right? If we view our line as a fractal of the line of 144,000. Do you see that? I was just saying, in all these things, we see how the sway mark of the close of probation, how 2019 looks like the close of probation. If we look at the line of the priest as a fractal, even though they are actually two different way marks. So, yes.
I was just wondering here, when we're talking about intercession ceases, could we then put an application to it that a certain class or we can't really pray for them anymore, say for example, leadership or institution or something like that, that the door closes on them, and so that intercession ceases for them?
Well, I guess that's the thing. When you say intercession, it means that God has given up on them. At that point, there's no point praying for them. But when we come to 2019, like even Ellen White communicates that idea that once Michael stands up, the work of salvation is done, right? You know, any prayers going up no longer benefit the wicked. They've sealed their faith. So when we come here, we're saying there's no end of intercession. That's not what we see here. That's, if we look at this line as line of progression, close of probation is its own way mark here in the future, right? So what happens here, it looks like the end of intercession, but it isn't. What happens, you know, so given that it's not the end of intercession in a literal sense, like at the close of probation, there is still mercy for these people. Their door is not closed, right? So even though they've rejected the truth, it does not mean don't pray for them, because God has not given up on them. Does that make sense?
Right. Okay, and I can see that, because I mean, on an individual basis, this is so, but would it, but I'm saying, for example, as an institution or something like that.
As an institution.
Yeah, say for example, okay, whether it be FFA or whether it be, you know, as an institution, not the various different people that might be in that.
Okay, so you're saying if we identify an end of intercession, it's the end of intercession upon an institution and not.
Right, not the individuals that might be in there or anything like that.
Right. and this going into our thoughts about the shut door. What are our thoughts about that? If we say 2019, there actually is a shut door, but it's not upon people. It's upon the institution of Future for America. Because when you look at the two classes, here it's the world and the 144,000. Here it's the movement in FFA.
The SDA church. No, it's the-
You want?
We've taught the SDA church closes its probation at Sunday law.
Yes.
So we've taught that institution shuts in that sense. the door
Yeah.
shuts for that.
Yeah, the door shuts for the institution at the Sunday law. But
Would it be helpful to do like, because we're still in an increase of knowledge for this time, right?
yes,
But theoretically, we should have everything for the 2014 to 2019.
we should have one.
We should have everything we need for 2014 to 2019.
Yeah, we have, there's more light opening up on it. And more light will continue to open up on our past history as we go forward continually. But we do have light on 2014, 2019.
So if we did this exercise for the 2014, hopefully we would have clearer, more concise answers, and that might help us in our application for these ones.
I see the importance of going through 2014, but I guess I'm not seeing the connection how looking at 2014 will help us to better answer this particular question. Of course, it will help us to be able to I guess trace the development, right? But and maybe it will, but I'm not seeing it as yet how that will help us answer this particular question. And we're going to get to that. Right? My contention is that the shut doors.
Because I mean, I'm just thinking here, because when we're taking a look at the two classes, we're taking a look at institutions again. And then when we're looking at the shut door, wouldn't it have to be in connection with that?
Yes. I think that makes sense, right? Because as you look at the shut doors from the line of Christ, my contention is going to be that there are multiple shut doors that we see along the line. And in order to understand, and each of those shut doors is different. Each of those shut doors has different characteristics. So we need to be more nuanced about how we understand this concept of the shut door. The model of Christ is showing us, that each of the shut doors that we've identified in that history, they're all communicating slightly different things. It's not just end of intercession, end of intercession, end of intercession, right? So we need to be more circumspect in that regard and really studying what was taking place there, in order to understand in our fractal, what is taking place at our corresponding waymark when we say there's a shut door there. And I think there's sense to the understanding, right? In fact, I think Tess has already taught this, but from a different perspective, right? I know I've heard it before, it wasn't me who was saying it. That FFA as an institution has sealed its fate, but there's still hope for the people inside.
So you're just referring to the leadership when you say institution?
No, the structure. The structure.
Of the methodology they use, or what do you mean by the structure?
Can we call it an institution?
I think so, why not? Like when you say the Adventist church, when you say the structure, what are we referring to then? The institution.
Yeah.
The organization.
The organization, right? So as long as you're in that organization, believing what it believes and so on and so forth, that organization, God has bypassed it. He ceased to use it as a vehicle through which he communicates light to his people, right? And that organization is doomed to destruction, right? But the individuals in it, if they're willing to separate from it and receive the truth, they can still yet be saved. I don't know if you see the difference.
Yeah, that's
Right. So it's like with the Jews. Intercession ended on the probation, the door shut on the Jewish church in 34 AD, right? Even though, and that was upon the structure, the organization, right? Of course, there are people in that organization, right? But as long as those people are willing to separate from it, separate from its beliefs, separate from its errors, and receive the truth, right? Those individuals, even though the institution has been bypassed and it's doomed to destruction, the individuals, if they will repent, they can still receive the truth.
And that is possible until.
for those who are organizing it.
That's what we're going to talk about. Do you have the answer?
Well, I'm trying to look at the line of Christ. And in the line of Christ, they really had this possibility until the stoning of Stephen, which was the close of probation, obviously.
I think they had the possibility until 70 AD.
Oh, but sorry, yes, 70,
Destruction of Jerusalem.
the destruction of Jerusalem.
Yeah.
So
What is our 70 AD?
that's something. No,
For the priest,
no, not for
No.
the priest. I'm looking at the big line now.
big line. Yeah.
That's something on the big line. Is it?
No, 70 AD in the big line is the close of probation.
Yes. So it means that they have opportunity until the count 12-1,
Yeah.
the real one,
That's how I understand.
but they are not considered.
God's people.
They are considered as people, but what are they?
What are they?
Yeah.
They're like the Gentiles, because given that they've been bypassed as God's representatives, they have to come the same route to salvation that the Gentiles have to take, they have to take as well. So they're treated as the Gentiles. As a Gentile, you're lost unless you receive the truth.
Just going back,
Sorry, the grace question then will come to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just, okay.
I can't remember now.
Oh, you had said the individuals leading it,
Yeah, because you referred to
the structure.
the structure and you said the organization, and then I said that's referring to the people who are organizing it. And so is that still referring to leadership?
Well, the thing is, it's not just referring to leadership. Even the leaders, if the leaders turn from, if the leaders are willing to separate from those false doctrines, repent and receive the truth, right? They can still be saved. Intercession has not ended for them, even though that the structure that they're part of, as long as they remain part of it, they're on a course towards destruction.
That would be the example of Nicodemus.
Yeah, Nicodemus was part of the Sanhedrin, the Jewish leadership. And the Jewish leadership had been bypassed as an institution. God no longer was using it as the vehicle to communicate truth to his people. He had bypassed it, right? In that sense, intercession had ended for it. It had closed its probation. But the individuals, even the leaders like Nicodemus, if they were willing to repent, turn from the error, separate and receive the truth, they would still be saved, right? And that was the premise in Germany, that, you know what, FFA's fate is sealed, but we're still reaching out to them because the individuals in it, if they can be shown their error, if there's any among them who are, you know, truly deceived, and they can be brought to repent and turn around, that door is still open for them. So that's the shut door. We're going to unpack that further because it's going to become a subject of the next study from you.
You just mentioned that, we're taking a look at the line of Christ, and I just wanted, I thought that when we're taking a look at AD 70, that is actually the second coming, because, we got the closed door on AD 34, the cross at Sunday law, and baptism would be then 9/11.
In that line, the cross doesn't appear.
The cross does not appear.
In that line, I guess if we lay it out at the big picture, what does it look like? You have 180 Patmos. What's that?
Second one.
That's the second coming. Then you have 70 AD, the destruction of Jerusalem. Just working backwards. That's what?
Close of probation.
Close of probation. Right? And you have 34 AD,
Sunday long.
Sunday law. And
We have baptism.
70 would be 9/11. So what were you saying? You were saying the cross is the Sunday law.
That's what I was thinking, yeah.
But you should just lay this out at the, the big picture. The cross doesn't even appear if we're going to use the waymarks in the line of that 144,000. The cross doesn't even appear at this level.
You know that no, sorry, I think I need to.
I'm making a mistake.
No, because I remember that, for example, Sister was saying that on the big line you can see rock and pattern.
On big line, you can't see rock and pattern.
You can.
Okay.
And so if you can add those two waymarks, and if you add them, you can see the cross.
Yes, you can see the cross here, right? You could add it in, but it's not a primary waymark.
So what would that waymark be? That on the big line, that's 1844, right?
No, if we're paralleling this with the line of 144,000. So if we fill in the gaps here, Pentecost. What would Pentecost line up with? 2021. And then the cross would line up with? Cross line up with 2019. But again, when you're looking at the line of the 144,000 and you're dealing with the primary waymarks, using the line of Christ as a model for it, you don't see these waymarks, right? At that level, of the line of 144,000. So 70 AD would be the close of probation, and 34 AD would be the Sunday law.
Okay, so can you draw that line now with with the regular?
The thing is this, I'll do this. I did this to answer your question, but we're going to look at this line as a focus when we look at the shut door.
Oh, okay.
Right. So I just want to wheel us back to here, kind of tie things up here before we break for lunch, and before our next study. So we're going to come back to this.
I guess connected to the shut door without going into darkness. It's interesting. I started reading the quotes, and it's clear that both groups go into darkness when that door shuts. So the disciples go into the darkness of death and despondency because all their hopes died in Christ when he's on the cross. And the Millerites go into darkness, and she says that an angel was sent to bring them out of that darkness.
Yeah.
So they research the scriptures even after the second disappointment. They do that the first time. So it's both groups go into darkness, but two groups never recover, and maybe it's a different type of darkness.
Yeah, it's a different type of darkness.
A bit like the sleep of the virgins, they do that sleep.
It's a different
She
sleep.
describes it as a real darkness for them, so we can have comfort that if we're in the darkness now, like we've been saying with mental isolation and all those things, that's what's supposed to happen when the door shuts. In that
Yeah.
sense.
But the thing is, in each of those illustrations of darkness at the close of probation, the outcome for the two classes is different.
Yes, yeah.
The righteous receive, an angel is sent to them, they receive light, and they receive strength, right? Although they have a dark experience, that's a different type of darkness for both of them, you know.
And perhaps both classes are still doubting whether this was the truth. You know, because they've got disappointment, it didn't happen, so they're questioning. I'm not saying they don't completely let go of it, but and there's one group that completely lets go of it, but the other class is still questioning. Perhaps they may on one level look the same at the beginning when it first happens, and they kind of.
I think now, seeing it happen, I think we're seeing two different types of darkness.
Yes, I do. It's just recognizing that.
You know, although 100%, I think both go into darkness. I think that's good.
The difference is endurance. One group tends to endure.
How much time?
1 minute.
Right, well, that time. Okay, so what was the question that we asked? We're talking about the shadow and the going into darkness. Of course, we're going to unpack that further. But we're discussing the idea that intercession does end in a sense, but it's upon an institution and not the individual. Right? Here, intercession ends on the world as a class. You know, here it ends for FFA as an institution, although there's still hope for the individuals. So in that sense, it's different from here. And that is not the end of intercession upon everybody, right?
So can I just clarify what that looks like? So if we parallel it to 1834, it means that now that church is no longer the vehicle. Maybe in the 70s it's clearly destroyed them, but the Jewish nation as a nation or the church is no longer the depository of truth.
Yes.
That it was before. So nobody can look at that as the light on the hill anymore.
Yes.
And that's clarifying what it means that it shuts on an institution, because that's quite, sometimes you just wrestle with that thinking, yeah, but the institution is made up of individuals. So what does it actually practically mean? It doesn't mean they've individually closed their probation necessarily. It means that as a church now, as a group, they're no longer the depository of truth.
Okay. You look tired, right? Someone's wholesale given up, we're going to see. But the rest of us, how are you feeling?
Let's do 2014.
2014.
No, carry on. Go on, really do that.
Still. Okay. So in order to understand 2014, what must we do?
Just the characteristics that came from the Sunday law.
Go to the model, yes?
Yeah.
And here we're going to read some script prophecy quotes. Right. We go to the model and allow it to do what?
Explain itself.
To explain itself. To instruct us as to what it is teaching. So we'll look at great controversy. Great controversy page. And I want to start with the passage that Tiffany referenced yesterday. Great controversy, page 608. Now, as we look at great controversy, right, we we must locate the passage that we are considering. When you want to locate the passage, how do we go about that? Someone must locate this passage for us. Locate this passage for us. Break down 608. How do you identify its location?
The final warning.
So you're saying the chapter title, the final warning? Okay.
What was it? GC.
608.
608.
Just push into it.
The final warning, chapter 30.
Yes. So we're locating the passage.
Maybe
What
read,
does that entail? What is it?
maybe read the first paragraph, that chapter.
Read the first paragraph.
I look at other chapters.
You look at other chapters.
Before I see where it's fitting in
Where it's fitting in on what?
the book.
In the book. To what end?
To where, the line.
Towards it on the line. So great controversy is laying out a line, the progression of events, right? So when you read a passage, it's useful to locate that passage in relation to identify where it is in that line of events. Right? So do you want to help us with that, Mr.
Yeah.
What is the line of events presented by the great controversy? Great controversy 608.
So right after the final warning, there's the time of trouble. The scriptures is sacred. So the time of trouble we can locate after the close of probation. And then, so this is coming prior to the close of probation.
I mentioned time of trouble.
Okay, so what chapter is the time of trouble?
The chapter time of trouble is 39.
Okay, so you have chapter 39, which is the time of trouble.
And chapter 38 is the final warning. So I guess the loud cry.
Right, chapter 38 is the final warning. How would you know?
Well, it's the last warning, and the last warning on a reform warning is the loud cry.
Okay, what's the chapter preceding 38?
38 is
What are the preceding chapters? Like flesh out this progression of events that great controversy.
the scriptures a safer.
Okay.
Is 37. 36 is the impending conflict.
Okay.
Liberty of conscience threatened, which is 35. So I don't know if that would be the Sunday law. It's threatened, but it's not. So maybe the conflict is the Sunday law, I'm not sure.
All right, so if we go further back, chapter 18, an American Informer.
1798.
American Reformer, 1798. Then chapter,
I just got a question. Would not chapter 17 Heralds of the Morning be a little bit more of 1798 and then with American Reformer 1833.
Well, American Reformer is the story of Miller.
Exactly.
And of course, with Miller, you know, his story, as far as the religious aspect of it, takes you back to 1798, your Caesar's Concordance,
Mhm.
right? And I think basically that chapter, Heralds of the Morning. Heralds of the Morning is this is the Reformation. The tail end of that 1260, you have the Reformation, which takes you to 1798, the time at the end, right?
Okay.
So that chapter brings you to 1798. So chapter 18 would begin in 1798.
So that would be like Wycliffe or somebody else like that then.
Chapter 17, yes.
Okay.
And chapter 18, we have William Miller.
Warning rejected, is that 1840?
Well, it's the rejection of the first angel's message as preached by, right, let's see, was it? Yeah. Yeah.
Because prophecies fulfilled also would be then August and October, or what is the sanctuary in the Holy of Holies and God's law? All of that would be.
1844.
Yeah.
So that's, what is the sanctuary? That's chapter?
That's chapter 23.
You have 23 to
I'd say 25.
25. Right. So just laying out the progression of events in great controversy, right? Jacob's time of trouble. Here's describing the close of probation.
Maybe till 28, because 28 is facing life's record and investigative judgment.
Okay.
So that the investigation begins that time.
The final warning, this is Sunday law.
A few chapters in great films.
You say what?
Quite a few chapters about evil. It says origin of evil, enmity between man and Satan, agency of evil spirits, snares of Satan. That's all the great controversy.
Yes.
Opening up Babylonic
And spiritualism, things of papacy.
spiritualism. How they speak to us.
Right. So now you come to chapter 38. You want to understand 608. You know it's in chapter 38. So what history is it talking about?
Revelation 18.
Yes. So when we locate the passage, you know, with great controversy, we're looking at where it is in the progression of events described by great controversy. And we look at the passage itself, right? We look at the passage itself. Now, the paragraph I want to read is 608 paragraph 1. That's the one Tiffany referenced yesterday. It says, conscientious obedience to the word of God will be treated as rebellion. Blinded by Satan, the parent will exercise harshness and severity toward the believing child. The master or mistress will oppress the commandment-keeping servant. Affection will be alienated. Children will be disinherited and driven from home. The words of Paul will literally be fulfilled. All that will live godly in Christ Jesus shall suffer persecution. Right? So, locating this passage, we can further locate it by reading it within its context. The portion that we're reading and considering, what is written before it, what is written after it. This one, it's easy, because great controversy is easy to do this. And that just the chapter structure, the chapter titles give you that progression. But in some passages that you're looking at, it's not so easy. You have to actually read what is being, you actually have to read the document, what is being said before, what is being said after it, in order to understand where it is located, right? Great controversy has made this easy for us. So here, one, understand that portion, but here it's easy because it's in the same paragraph. She goes on to say, as the defenders of truth refuse to honor the Sunday Sabbath, some of them will be thrust in prison, some will be exiled, some will be treated as slaves, right? So this is talking within the context of the Sunday law. This is speaking within the context of the Sunday law. And the previous paragraphs confirm this. The 607 paragraph 1, as the controversy extends into new fields, the minds of the people are called to God's downtrodden law, right? This is Sunday law time period. So having located this passage in the Sunday law time, what is it describing? It's talking about families, people who were once united, right? Now being on different sides of the truth, and persecution, conflict, and separation ensuing between them. So what do we do here? What do we do with that? We've located this passage in the Sunday law time, right? What does it mean for us? What do we do?
Well, take some of the characteristics and bring them to our waymark.
Exactly. You have to locate you have to bring the passage into our time, right? So here it's this 608 is located in the Sunday law. It's describing things at the Sunday law. What's the corresponding waymark in our line? 2014, right? So from 2014 onwards, do you see developments that look like what is being described here?
Yeah, but not so much.
What is it? Is this part just kind of repeating the last chapter then?
What do you mean?
I mean, we're in the final warning.
And you've located it correctly, that it's the Sunday law.
Okay.
So, you what?
Remind me.
So what do we see in 2014 onwards that looks like what we've just read?
I mean, you see that families have separated.
Over
because
the truth?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the first bit, conscientious obedience to the will of God would treat as rebellion. That's certainly what happened with an acceptance of time in the movement. The predictions made 2012, 2014 comes in.
And that was counted as rebellion.
It was counted as rebellion, yeah, it was counted as rebellion. Conscientious obedience to the will of God. But, yeah, maybe you could say that was before 2014 as opposed to actually at 2014.
I mean, in 2014, there's plenty of that where conscientious obedience is seen as rebellion. 2014, no evangelism, exclusive internal work. That was definitely viewed as rebellion.
By who? By the church?
Well, within the context of our line, it's internal to the movement at this point.
People.
Because as we pointed out, as we discussed yesterday, we're not dealing with the church at this point, right? It's describing developments internal to the movement. And there was definitely a class within the movement who viewed conscientious obedience to these new faces of truth as rebellion.
So would some of the key words then be where it says affection will be alienated? So would that be one of the key words then for that period?
Did we see that?
It's, yeah, I mean, when you see that separation.
I definitely could see that. That definitely happened. Affection was alienated between those who continued in the truth and those who did not. regardless of how close you were before.
So that was a big thing with Path of the Just. Was it the evangelism?
With all of them, with Path of the Just, with Emiliano, with
And Casting was part of that group, yeah. Okay.
with Wesley Smith, all those teachers who left in that time. That was a sticking point for them.
Right, perhaps because you're more familiar with what was the issue.
And that was in 2014 specifically, but you see that development kind of taking place all along the way. Where conflict erupts between brethren and even families, resulting in alienation of perfection, even separation, right? I can think of a number of examples where this message has separated, families and even marriages, right? In this 2014 to 2019 time period.
Seems more pronounced now, that's all.
Yeah.
I guess it's continued escalation.
Yeah, it has escalated definitely as we approach 2019.
Yeah.
But it can definitely trace it in this time period. Persecution, definitely, right? That's been going on, right? So we see it, obviously not to the intensity of what is being described here, where people are treated as slaves and people are being thrown into prison and people are being exiled, but to scale, the things that you see at the Sunday law look like what took place in 2014. 2014 onwards, Sunday law onwards.
I guess being part of the time of 2012, it felt like that was a massive smash. It just felt like that was bigger than what happened after, to me, but that's maybe my personal testimony. That we've always had opposition since the beginning of this message. It's caused strife and alienation and persecution from glorious land 2520 to the time setting as a culmination point, turning point, I guess, in one level, in my experience, and then it kind of escalates even more after 2014.
I think 2012, I think it's big to you because you're at the eye of the storm.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
And you're probably more at the eye with the Milan in 2014, so that's probably easier for you to see that one.
Yeah, but I remember engaging with the subject. I remember how it happened because I saw those videos went up, and I was like, I don't know. And then I was coming to engage him, and I was like, if you're saying time, then what about this? What about this? What about that? And he was honest. He said, hey, I don't have answers for those questions, but if this is light, those answers will come, right? And it was shortly after that, Jeff came and just shut down everything.
Mm-hmm.
Now, for you at the eye of the storm, that's like a wall falling on you.
Mm-hmm.
But for us, it's like just never heard of it again.
Yeah,
Until
for us, it was just like there was a video and then it was gone.
next it was pulled
That
down,
was it.
and that was that.
And that smashed that study group. Well, it went smashed after that, but I think it kind of felt like a turning point of decimation. We recovered by 2014. We were kind of recovering and getting back into the swing of things. I mean, that camp meeting movement, it was, yeah.
Well, we're out of time. We'll continue in our next slide. Let's close the mic. Father in heaven, we thank you for your word. Lord, please help us as we grapple with these concepts, as we seek to understand how your message works, how these lines work. Help us to gain confidence, knowledge, and ability, dear Father. We ask that these studies may do a work for eternity for all in this room and all who may watch the presentations as they are uploaded. Lord, we thank you for the lunch that has been prepared. May you please bless it and bless our fellowship together throughout the course of the afternoon. For we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Whoa. There's not enough room for you